June 4, 1942. Dawn. North Pacific waters shimmer under a gray sky as the carriers of Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's strike force cut their wakes across the swells. On the bridge of Akagi, Nagumo waits for the last of his scouts to report back. He peers into the distance, a cigarette pinched between his fingers, the steel deck humming with turbine vibrations beneath his boots. Somewhere beyond that horizon, he knows, lies Midway Atoll, his target, his trap, his gamble. At the same moment, across hundreds of miles of ocean, the decks of 3 American carriers rumble with the roar of warming engines. Pilots climb into cockpits, goggles down, nerves hardening. Admiral Chester Nimitz's ambush is already in motion, silent and invisible, a set of steel jaws closing in while Nagumo still waits for answers. Smoke trails tear the sky into black ribbons as the first Zero falls, spiraling into the sea. The impact scatters fuel and foam across the waves, flames licking outward in orange tongues. Tracers arc in jagged lines, turning the morning into a stuttering film of fire and water. Below, the Pacific churns as bombs detonate short of their marks, sending geysers into the air. Overhead, a Catalina flying boat drags its shadow across the horizon, its crew scribbling position notes with the urgency of typewriter keys hammering paper. For every image of flame on the sea, there is another of pencil on paper, signal flags raised, codebooks cracked. The battle is not only fought in the roar of engines, but also in the quiet corners of intelligence huts, where scribbled numbers matter more than the thunder of bombs. Midway itself is no fortress, just a coral atoll, a narrow strip of sand and rock, with a runway barely over a mile long. Yet its geometry decides reach and survival. It lies 1,100 miles from Pearl Harbor, a midpoint between Hawaii and Japan's sphere of influence. For Tokyo, its capture means pushing the defense line east, shielding the homeland and threatening American supply routes. For Washington, its defense means holding the line long enough to bleed Japan's navy. The numbers are blunt. One fleet carrier consumes more than 5,000 tons of fuel oil during a single sortie cycle, and 4 such giants stretch logistics like gears grinding without grease. Japan can ill afford long lines across the Pacific, tankers vulnerable to submarines and attrition. Midway, with only 1,200 Marines and a handful of planes, becomes the pivot of strategy, the hinge upon which industrial empires strain like overworked pistons. In the months before the battle, the war turns not on gunfire but on silence broken by intercepted code. In a dim room at Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Rochefort's team hunches over cipher tables, the air heavy with sweat and cigarette smoke. They wrestle with JN-25, the Japanese fleet code, breaking down digits and syllables into fragments of meaning. The phrase AF repeats in traffic. Is it a ruse? They improvise a test. Midway's garrison is ordered to broadcast a plain text message about a water shortage. Days later, Tokyo radios that AF is short of water. The trap is confirmed. Nimitz, calm but cold as steel, begins to shift carriers into position. He knows the numbers. The Japanese Navy fields 10 times the combat experience. Only an ambush can redress the imbalance. On the west coast, factories hammer metal into wings and fuselages, riveting Wildcats and Dauntlesses at a pace of hundreds per month. Each aircraft becomes a gear in a larger engine, feeding a machine designed to grind down an enemy who cannot replace what it loses. The Japanese task force sails with deadly symmetry. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. 4 carriers, each carrying around 72 aircraft. Their decks hold rows of A6M Zeros, sleek and agile, D3A Val dive bombers with folding wings, and B5N torpedo planes, engines coughing smoke before takeoff. Each carrier is a floating airfield, crewed by nearly 2,000 men. Opposite them, the Americans bring 3 carriers, Hornet, Enterprise, and Yorktown, with about 233 carrier aircraft, and another 115 stationed on Midway itself. Yorktown, battered at Coral Sea, is patched up in just 3 days at Pearl, welders working around the clock to make her seaworthy. Below decks on Enterprise, mechanics check Dauntless dive bombers, their bomb racks locked, their engines primed. The hangar is a cavern of oil fumes and steel clanks, every surface vibrating like pistons waiting for ignition. At 04:30 on June 4th, the stillness breaks. Japanese strike groups roar off the decks toward Midway, the carrier's engines shuddering with each launch. American radar picks them up minutes later, a blip against the static. Sirens wail across Midway Atoll as Marine fighters scramble. Wildcats and buffaloes claw for altitude but are outnumbered 4-1. The sky becomes a furnace. Tracers cutting arcs, machine guns rattling, smoke streaming from punctured engines. B-26 Marauders and torpedo planes stagger into attack runs, their formations shredded by zeros before they can line up on the Japanese carriers. Most don't return. On Akagi's bridge, Nagumo receives reports. Midway is damaged but not neutralized. Hangars shake as his crews haul bombs back below decks, readying for another strike. But as the elevators rise and fall with deadly cargo, unseen above the cloud cover, American dive bombers search for his fleet. The moment of collision approaches, measured in minutes and gallons of fuel. Nagumo's dilemma sharpens like a blade under strain. His first strike has not silenced Midway's airfield, yet scouts now warn of American carriers lurking to the northeast. He orders rearming, torpedoes swapped for bombs swapped back again, while carrier elevators grind ceaselessly, hauling lethal cargo up and down. The hangar decks become mazes of half-fueled planes, their bellies open, ordnance scattered across steel floors. Japanese destroyers widen the defensive ring, anti-aircraft batteries bristling. Above, Zeros swarm like a shifting wall of aluminum, intercepting any intruder. On the American side, radar plots vectors with mechanical precision. Yorktown's CIC guides Wildcat fighters into arcs of interception, squadrons moving as if on a chessboard. What looks chaotic from the air is in fact structured adaptation, a fleet learning in real time how to counter the world's most seasoned naval air arm. Yet the strain grinds men and machines to breaking point. Japanese hangar crews labor in heat over 120 degrees Fahrenheit, dripping sweat onto warheads they have no time to secure. Each spark, each clumsy step threatens catastrophe. On the American side, the obsolescence of the TBD Devastator is laid bare. With a top speed slower than the Japanese carriers they target, the torpedo planes lumber into firestorms they cannot evade. Squadron after squadron presses home attacks only to be cut down. Out of 41 Devastators launched that morning, just one survives. Fuel gauges drop to near empty as pilots hold their course, knowing that survival odds sink with every second in the air. Engines wheeze, controls stiffen, yet they keep going. The limit is no longer tactical but human, the capacity to fly straight at death because duty demands it. Then comes the hammer blow. From Hiryu's decks, counterstrikes launch with practiced speed. Zero escorts fanning outward as B-5N torpedo bombers dive toward Yorktown. At 1400 hours, 2 torpedoes tear into her side, followed by bombs that punch through the flight deck. Explosions reverberate through bulkheads, hurling steel doors from their hinges. Fires rage across compartments, black smoke pouring upward. Pumps groan, hoses hiss, crewmen scramble with buckets and extinguishers. For a time, damage control holds the ship steady, the crew refusing to yield. But the strain is too great. Yorktown lists, power falters, and the order to abandon ship is given. Sailors slide down ropes into oily water as their carrier smolders behind them. The smell of burnt paint was stronger than cordite, wrote Lieutenant Commander J.V. Babcock in his diary that night, capturing the sensory memory of a setback that seemed fatal. The Americans are now down one carrier, their position hanging by a thread of endurance. The Americans improvise under pressure. At 10:20 hours, a lone scout plane spots Nagumo's fleet through a break in the clouds, reporting position with scratchy radio bursts. Pilots from Enterprise and Yorktown seize the moment. Their Dauntless dive bombers had been circling aimlessly, running low on fuel. Now they pivot. Squadron leaders order a split formation, one group attacking from the north, another from the south. Ordnance crews had earlier adjusted bomb fuses for delayed detonation, an improvised tweak ensuring penetration through armored flight decks before detonation. Engines roar as they push into near-vertical dives, cockpits vibrating like pistons at redline. What follows is 6 minutes of destruction that reshapes the Pacific. Dauntlesses slice down from 20,000 feet, canopies rattling, wind shrieking past wings. Bombs release with metallic clunks, gravity pulling them toward clustered targets. Kaga erupts first, chain reactions tearing through fuel lines and bomb racks. Akagi follows. a single bomb igniting the packed hangar deck and sending sheets of flame through her superstructure. Soryu is next, her decks buckling as explosions ripple through. Japanese gunners fire desperately, but the angles are wrong, the timing too late. Within minutes, 3 carriers, the pride of the First Air Fleet, are infernos, black smoke spiraling into the sky, visible for over 100 miles. Hiryu alone remains afloat, and she strikes back savagely, crippling Yorktown. But by evening, Dauntless squadrons find her too, and a concentrated attack smashes her decks, sealing her fate. The sea swallows 4 carriers in one day, an outcome no planner on either side had believed possible. The aftermath is brutal arithmetic. Japan loses Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, along with 248 aircraft and over 3,000 sailors. More crippling than steel and fuel is the loss of veteran air crews, men honed through years of combat in China and Pearl Harbor, irreplaceable within Japan's limited pilot training system. America pays heavily too, 307 men dead, 1 carrier lost, 150 aircraft destroyed. But the U.S. can replace ships and planes in months, while Japan cannot replace experience at any speed. The balance shifts. A machine once running smoothly on Tokyo's timetable now grinds with missing teeth, its gears stripped by a single miscalculated strike. Midway marks the first time Japan's naval momentum is not just slowed, but reversed. From this battle forward, the Pacific belongs to whichever side can feed steel into the ocean faster, and the United States has the factories, fuel, and manpower to do so. At Midway, the Pacific's balance of steel turned not by numbers alone, but by code breakers, timing, and the brutal physics of carriers burning under the open sky.